Is your brand delivering good customer experiences for all the people that you serve or just some of them? Far too many customer experiences fall short because they weren't built with all the different identities that your ideal customers have in mind. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through a tool, or a spectrum rather, that I developed that will help you see where your brand stands today along various parts of your customer journey and help you identify key areas to improve. As a result, not only will you convert more customers, but more of them will be loyal to you as well. All right, so let's get into this customer experience spectrum. It highlights the different ways brands show up for the customers they serve from an inclusivity standpoint. The first category on the spectrum is, of course, not where you want to be. The second category is a market improvement, but not really where you want to stay. And the last three categories deliver better experiences overall, with the last two categories being ideal. Now, I do want to note that this spectrum is fluid. As a brand, you may deliver certain experiences that are in one category and other experiences that fall in another. How you serve certain groups of your customers may fall in one category, and how you serve other groups of customers might fall in a different category as well. Now, the goal of these various examples that I'm going to walk you through is to expand your awareness of the different types of experiences all the people that you're serving experience as they go through various parts of your customer journey. That awareness will help you make intentional choices about where to focus your efforts so you can make necessary improvements. Okay, so the first category on the spectrum is exclusion. Now, there's really not much to say about this one. Just know that there are a large number of brands who are excluding a large percentage of their ideal customers in various parts of the customer experience they are delivering. Now, this most often happens because brands aren't taking into consideration the fact that consumers have differences. And as a result, they're not accommodating or planning for those differences in any way. These brands cater to the mainstream and the mainstream only. Now, this approach doesn't mean that there is ill will on the part of the marketers and brand leaders who are engaging in this practice on their customer experience spectrum. However, the impact on people who have differences and are part of underrepresented and underserved communities, that's very real. Brands that are excluding large groups of their ideal customers, in most instances without even knowing that they're doing it, are missing out on both customers and revenue. So hopefully they will get hip to the fact that they should be intentional about incorporating the different identities of the customers that they want to serve into the customer experience that they design. Now, I do want to note that this type of exclusion is totally fine and acceptable for those customer groups that you have proactively decided that you aren't going to be focusing on at this point in time. So whenever I'm referring to exclusion in this sense from your overall customer experience, I am not referring to those intentional types of decisions for customers that you have specifically decided that you aren't going to be serving right now. And I also don't mean that you are saying that these specific types of customers who you might not be focusing on right now aren't welcome in your business. For instance, if your brand is only focused on English speakers from a marketing and customer experience standpoint, and someone comes in and buys from you that only speaks French, they will gladly take their money. In most instances, marketing that excludes means the marketing and customer experiences that you deliver doesn't do anything to acknowledge the specific needs of a group of customers with a shared identity. Now, of course, excluding certain groups or not being intentional about including them in some sort of way, it is totally your choice to make for your brand. Just know that in making the choice to exclude, you will likely convert a whole lot less of the people who have that identity. All right, so the second category on the spectrum is called raise your hand if you are different. Now, I don't want to rail too hard about this category because in most instances, people who are engaging in this form of the customer experience spectrum, they're trying, but the experience that they are actually delivering, it's falling short. And it doesn't make the actual customer feel good in a lot of instances. We can all agree that making customers feel some type of way isn't good for business. It only causes unnecessary friction that makes these ideal consumers of yours walk away and never look back. So why is this approach something that you want to avoid? Because people have varying relationships with the things that make them different. And sometimes their relationship with what makes them different is fluid. They might not always want to bring it up. And even if they have a great relationship with what makes them different, there might be times where they just don't want to have to think about it. And plenty of people just don't want to have to share their differences with strangers that they've just met. So as marketers and business leaders, let's do everything in our power to avoid making this part of the customer experience that you deliver. My favorite example that illustrates this comes from the great Shonda Rhimes in her book, Year of Yes. In it, she describes a time when she couldn't close the standard seatbelt on her first class seat for a flight because of her weight. In that moment, she weighed her options. She could ask the flight attendant for a seatbelt extender, or she could take the risk of falling out of her seat and dying as a result of not having an extender-free seatbelt buckled. In the end, Rhimes decided to risk disaster because she wasn't going to say anything to the flight attendant. In the book, Shonda goes on to say how she ended up losing 100 pounds. It's a wonderful story, but her weight loss isn't the point of this example. The point is that she would have rather have died rather than say something to the flight attendant about something that she needed for her own safety. I saw something similar happen like this firsthand. A while back, I was speaking at a conference, and right after my talk, we all went out to have lunch on site for a lunch that the conference had catered. Now, I follow a gluten-free diet for health reasons, so whenever I walked up to the lunch to see what it was that I was going to eat, I noticed that there were not any labels on the food saying if something was gluten-free or what some of the ingredients are that are common allergens. It didn't have that information. So I went and asked one of the staff if they could help me. About 10 minutes later, someone came out with a full plate of food that the chef had prepared just for me, that was full of food that was safe for me to eat and that wasn't going to make me sick. It even had food on the plate that wasn't a part of the buffet, and I felt super special. So whenever I sat down to eat, I ended up telling this story to the woman who was sitting next to me, who was one of the conference attendees. She told me that she also follows a gluten-free diet for health reasons. So she had the same problem that I did. The food wasn't labeled what was safe to eat and what wasn't, but she chose not to say anything. She told me she didn't want to be a burden, so she just guessed which foods would be safe for her to eat and which ones would not be. Hopefully, things worked out for her in that she didn't get sick. Listen, as someone with dietary restrictions who's perfectly comfortable with the fact that I have to follow this gluten-free diet, I absolutely hate that I have to be the person at a restaurant or whenever I'm eating outside of my home that's got to ask all the questions about the food or ask for a separate menu or accommodations. I hate it. So what's happening here? In a lot of instances, consumers who've got differences and need accommodations and need something specific have to muster up all this courage to be able to raise their hand and let someone know that they have these differences to be able to get what it is that they need. They often have to go to a stranger and divulge personal parts of who they are to get what it is that they need. So yes, while the brand will often have these accommodations available, like a seatbelt extender or like the gluten-free options on a menu, what the customer has to do to get access to those accommodations is a less than desirable experience. So the third category in the spectrum, and here's where we're starting to deliver better customer experiences, is what I like to call you've got options. This is where brands are starting to do a better job of acknowledging that people have differences. And this category improves upon the previous one where you have to raise your hand if you're different, because it allows consumers to self-select what it is that they want and need. This is so much better than having to call out to someone or raise your hand to let someone know the ways in which you are different. So here are some ways that some brands are going about delivering a better customer experiences to allow customers to choose what options work best for them. At Sprinkles Cupcakes, they've got a full range of cupcakes. They also have 2 gluten-free cupcakes, a vegan cupcake, and for a long time they had a sugar-free cupcake. They cater to people with these dietary restrictions by giving them some options. And those options are clearly labeled. The customer just has to tell the person helping them behind the counter, or they just have to select an option on the cupcake ATM machine, just like everyone else, and off they go. Walmart introduced sensory-friendly hours a while back. These hours are from 8 to 10 every morning in all the Walmart stores in the US and Puerto Rico. They do this for their shoppers who have sensory processing disorder who get overstimulated very easily. So each morning during these sensory-friendly hours, there's no music playing, the lights are dimmed, and any TV screens have just a static image on them. So consumers who need an environment that isn't so stimulating from a sensory standpoint can choose to go to Walmart during these hours. Sensory processing disorder is common among people who have autism, ADHD, PTSD, and dyslexia. One other common example of this you've got options category comes from a theme park. Now, we were standing in a long line for a roller coaster, and I noticed that of all the lines that you would sit in to be able to get on the ride and sit in your seat, there were 2 aisles specifically that were labeled for people who have a wider frame or broader shoulders. So whenever you're going to select which seat you're going to sit in, you would just walk to the aisles that had the overhead sign that was designed for people who needed a little bit more space. And the beauty of it was anybody could go and get in that aisle. You could be someone who needed the extra space or someone who didn't. The important thing is people were able to self-select which option they preferred without having to divulge any information specific about themselves to be able to get their needs met. The sign offering options for consumers made it a much more pleasant experience for them. So the next category on my customer experience spectrum is one area where you should strive to ensure the experiences you deliver land, and it's what I call your normal. Now, normal is kind of a weird word because really, what is normal anyway? But that's a topic for another day. Sometimes people just don't want to feel different. They don't want to have to think about their differences. They just want to have the same types of experiences with the same number of steps and experience the same degree of success as other people. So anytime a brand is able to acknowledge the ways in which people feel different without making the person feel different, that's a win. Now, here are some examples of how some brands have done that successfully. Underwear and shapewear brand Skims makes shopping for undergarments that match your skin tone a seamless experience. No one shade is elevated above the other. If you go to the website and wanted to buy a bra, for instance, there's a large range of shades that makes it easy for you to pick the one that matches your skin tone. Fenty Beauty has 50 shades of foundation to cover people who have different complexions. Every shade is covered and no one shade is elevated or viewed more normal or more common above another. A few years ago, retailer Old Navy launched Body Quality, which they called a fashion revolution. With this new approach, they removed plus size sections from their stores. They also removed it as a category on their website and put all their selections together. This meant that people didn't have to feel othered by having to go to another section of the store to find clothes that worked for them. Another element of the change that Old Navy made was that all the sizes were the same price. So if there's a pair of jeans that was a size 6 and it cost $25, that same pair of jeans in a size 24 would still cost $25. It used to be that Old Navy and a lot of brands followed this practice, would price items higher for people who didn't quite fit into what would be considered to be normal or common or mainstream. I know this firsthand because there are a ton of restaurants who will charge you more for a gluten-free hamburger bun. Perhaps one of my favorite examples from the your normal category on the customer experience spectrum comes from the technology industry. For instance, if you're buying a new Samsung phone or an iPhone or just any type of smartphone, it is already configured to work in a ton of different languages. Just choose your preferred language and you're good to go. Same with cars, because the screens on cars have words on them. The choose your language functionality is already built in. So people who speak Spanish, French, Portuguese, Japanese, or Hindi can easily go in and just select which language they want to use the product in. And then everything changes based upon their selection. The key thing here that makes this approach work so well is that it doesn't center any one identity as normal or preferred. And it also doesn't treat one identity as more preferred or more profitable as the other from a consumer perspective. In this aspect of the experience, the brand is just acknowledging that consumers are different and they're building products, services, and experiences accordingly. All right, so the last category in the customer experience spectrum, and this is another preferred slot that you want your brand experience to fall in, is what I like to call exclusively for you. Now, there are some groups of customers that have very specific needs that make it a little bit more difficult to deliver the your normal experience that you would be able to create for a much larger customer base. That's why some brands have chosen to develop products, services, and experiences that are designed for a very specific group of customers with a specific identity. And what the brands are designing addresses their very specific needs. This strategy works for building an entire company around it, and it also works for just delivering a specific product or experience around this for that customer group. Nike has used this strategy for one aspect of their product offering, and they've done this on a couple of occasions. One is with their Pro Hijab line of performance sportswear for Muslim women athletes who prefer to cover their heads for religious reasons. Haute Hijab is a fashion company that focuses on Muslim women exclusively, with their principal product being hijabs, including ones made for sport. They also sell hijab magnets and other accessories. Now, some people, particularly those from underrepresented and underserved communities, do like to buy from brands who are specifically created to serve people who are just like them. And quite frankly, there are some people who prefer to buy from brands who the owner, the founder, or the management, the leadership are people who share their identity. They'll prefer to go and buy from these types of companies rather than the ones that cater to the masses. And one other example in this exclusively for you category is Canyon Bakehouse, a company that specializes in selling gluten-free breads that are also free of other common allergens for people. Just one thing to note, this also works for service-based businesses as well. Curves Fitness, for instance, is a gym that is for women only. Now it's time to decide where you want to be on the customer experience spectrum throughout your customer journey. Now that you know the categories that are on the spectrum, it's time to decide where you want your products and services and experiences to fall on that spectrum. Doing it this way will make it easier for you to decide how to close any gaps that exist between where you are and where you want to be on the spectrum. I want to hear from you as a consumer. Let me know, are there any categories on the spectrum that you prefer? Are there any that you just absolutely hate? Tell us about these experiences below. Let's share and help these brands do better about the experiences that they are delivering. Until next time, remember, everyone deserves to have a place where they belong. Let's use our individual and collective power to ensure more people feel like they do. Thanks so much for watching. Talk to you soon.